So as you guys got an idea already from thumbnail that in today's video, all I'm going to cover is 9 points that you should keep in mind while writing your Apex trigger logic. And you can call it as trigger best practices. And I'm pretty much sure in the longer run, these points will help you to write more scalable code and more robust logic for your application. So without any further delays, let's get started. Hi, my name is Siddharth and welcome to my channel Tech Trivia. Number one trigger per object. Now in theory, you can add as many triggers as you want on a single object, but the problem arises when you have multiple triggers referencing to the same event. Now, you know that Salesforce executes your before triggers before data is saved and after triggers after data is saved. But what if, let's say, you have 5 triggers referencing to before insert event and you actually wanted to execute your logic in a specific order, like trigger A should be executed before trigger B and trigger B should be executed before trigger C. Now, there is no way that you can control the order of operation because there is no guarantee in which order Salesforce will execute all your before insert triggers. So you need to maintain one trigger on one object to fix this problem. And one other problem is when you have multiple triggers on a single object, the governor limits will be shared across your triggers. So instead of one trigger getting maximum of 100 SOQL queries, now this limit will be shared across all of your triggers on that single object. This will make it difficult to ensure that multiple triggers are efficient and there is no redundancy exists in your code base. So that is why we follow this principle, one trigger per object. Number 2, logicless trigger. So you should write your trigger logic in an Apex class. We call it a trigger handler class. And in your trigger, you simply reference to the class and the methods. So your trigger is gonna delegate the logic responsibilities to the handler class. Now, why should you do that? You may find it easier to write your trigger logic in the trigger body itself. But if you're writing your logic in the trigger body, it is not exposed in your org, in your application, and cannot be reused if needed. And as your org grows, your application grows, your code base grows, cramming all your logic into a trigger creates a mess one day. And it may need more development efforts to improve the code or to find a bug and fix it. You should follow a framework for your trigger and put your logic into an Apex class. And because now you are writing your logic in Apex class, you can use OOPS principles like utilities, abstractions, and make your code, make your logic more meaningful, more effective, and reusable. Number 3, context-specific handler methods. So ideally, you should add methods in your handler class for every event, like before insert, before update, after update, etc. Now, if you are not sure or if you don't know about trigger events, I have already covered them in one of my previous videos. I'm gonna give the link in the I button here. So please check that out first. So you should write your methods, separate methods for every context in your handler class. Now, in some of the cases, let's say your application is too huge and you have so many triggers, it is complex by nature. So it is also okay to add a context specific handler class. Number 4, bulkify your code. Now you should always consider a situation that a user is dealing with multiple records by using a data loader or an import wizard or by using any other ETL tool. Now in that case, your trigger logic should be efficient enough to handle multiple records and process them. For an example, instead of performing DML on a single record, you can prepare a collection, a list, and you perform your DML on that list. So make sure your trigger logic handles bulk records. 5. Avoid SOQL or RDML inside of for loop. Now I remember one of the incidents when I was reviewing code of one of my mentees, and I pointed that she wrote SOQL inside of for loop. So she just updated the code and replaced for loop with while loop and sent the code back to me for review. So since then, I started stating you should never ever write any statements that has a transactional limit inside of any loop. Because when you are using a loop, it could be a for or while or do while. The statements that you are adding are going to be executed multiple times. And because SOQL, DML kinds of statements got transactional limit, you cannot issue more than 100 SOQL query per transaction. You cannot perform more than 150 DML statements, right? If you are using this type of statements inside of loop, it is more likely to hit the governor limit easily. So you should avoid that. Number 6, using collections, streamlining queries, and efficient for loops. So always avoid writing uh, multiple queries to fetch the same data set. Instead, what you can do is you write your query efficiently and assign the result to a collection in the memory and then use it again whenever is needed. So you just make a combination of like for loops, collections, and queries in a such a way so that you should not hit any governor limits. Number 7, use SOQL for loop. So as you know, your SOQL query can fetch maximum of 50,000 records, and at times when your query is trying to return larger set of data, it can cause to exceed your heap size. So what you can do is you can actually use SOQLFor loop, and that will process multiple batches of the records using query more methods. So it will always be a good practice that you use SOQLFor loop to handle larger set of data. Number 8, use future methods appropriately. Now, as you're writing your code in efficient way so that it can handle and process multiple records, you may consider future methods as asynchronous process, and it has its own set of higher governor limits. But always keep in mind it still has a limit. So you need to ensure that you are not hitting that governor limit. 9. Avoid hard-coding IDs in your code. Now, in your production and full copy sandbox and partial copy sandbox, you may find the same IDs, same record IDs. But what if you are deploying your code, your trigger into an org that do not have that record IDs? In that case, your logic will fail. So always write your logic in the way so that instead of using the hard-coded ID values, you dynamically query the data from that org and use them. Alright, so these are the 9 points that you should keep in mind while writing triggers. And I believe these points will help you to improve your overall coding skills and your code efficiency. If you are liking the video, then please hit the like button and share it with others. This will motivate me to create more and more such a learning videos. And if you are new to the channel, then please hit the subscribe button and the bell icon. And that is it for today. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week with a new learning topic. Happy learning.